Welcome back. You're watching AM Live on this Wednesday, the 30th day of August 2023. And we're now getting into the conversation that we promised you about. And this we call cartel country. And we are asking, is it a convenient excuse, a scapegoat, or the impossible to beat enemy? Of course, the background of this conversation being the very many sentiments made by top government officials when they intend to deliver on services. I say this because the latest is about President William Ruto, who is in the Western region, and in a bid to promise to that he will revive the sugar sector, he has not once, not twice, spoken about cartels in the industry. Just the beginning of their presidency, we had the deputy president, Rigathi Gachagua, speak about cartels in the coffee, milk, and tea industries, which he promised to deal with. How far that has gone is something that we shall be putting the deputy president to task in the next couple of weeks. And we have also had cartels in various other sectors, edible oil. This is all agriculture, but also beyond agriculture in other sectors, including at Nyayo House. And that is something that the EACC will be telling us about. My guests again, Philip Gishana. Philip is the head of policy and partnerships at Mzalendo Trust, has done quite a bit about cartels and corruption in the country. I also have the second Philip, that is Philip Kagushia, the Deputy Director, Legal Services, Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. I also have the Honorable John Kanyuithia Mutunga, Member of Parliament, Tigania West, and Chair of the Agriculture Committee in the National Assembly. We have been expecting, he is not yet here, the Honorable John Badi, the Chairperson of the Public Accounts Committee in the National Assembly, also nominated Member of Parliament. He would have given us a proper perspective about this particular topic from PAC's view. But let me start with you, Philip. When you hear government officials, now let's not restrict ourselves to the president, speak about cartels, when people from a specific region call for services, the first thing that you'll hear is that we'll start by reading off the cartels. It's not something that started today. Even during the previous regime, so Uhuru Kenyatta's government, we had the same thing. At the end of the day, we don't, or sort of they find an excuse because if the second regime comes and still speaks about the same, it means it was never gotten rid of. So is it a convenient excuse that they are giving? Is it a scapegoat? Or is it actually an impossible to beat enemy?
I'd want to speak about the latter. I believe it's an enemy, but not an impossible enemy to defeat. And allow me to say this, that I want to make reference to a study that was done by the Basel Institute of Governance. And that study was looking at the informal governance system, where you look at a state, while you have the proper legal policies and even institutional frameworks, those institutional frameworks and the legal procedures and policies that you have are weak. So when that happens and those systems are weak, what you get going is then the informal networks. And these informal networks, they work very well, both from the political elite. If I'm a politician, I will need, a couple of my friends to ensure they back me, for example, in campaigns. I'm able to vanquish my enemies. I'm able to deliver services to the people. That's why you see sometimes Shimua will be talking about, I need to speak to the president because I need, for example, electricity in my area. I need roads in my area. So that connection of how you get to, the power to be forms an informal network. It's not written anywhere, but then it's an informal network that you'll have to use to get your people what they want. If it is the business elite and the businessmen, let me call them the businessmen, it works for them, yeah? Because they normally say, if you're a businessman and you are not transacting with government, then you're not in business, or you're not doing business as it should be. So these, your networks, again, help you to get, the lucrative tenders. You're able to access whatever government has to offer. And of course, we know the biggest spender is government. So if you are dealing with government, then you are a good businessman and you're good to go. The other element is also for the citizens, unfortunately, is that there's how the informal system also works for the citizen. And unfortunately, we have accepted it, some of us, as a way of life, and we think it's okay because we call it giving you a shot, yeah, at a place or a service that you would ideally, not get because you are Ibrahim. So you have to ensure that Ibrahim, you know somebody, either it is a relationship. If it's a hospital, you need a good bed in the ICU. It pays for you to know a doctor, somebody there, or an accountant in some hospital. So that way you are able to connect through and get there. There are countries that have undergone these systems, yeah, the informal system. It works. There are some that we're struggling. This study was done in Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania, Rwanda, and Georgia, I think. And Georgia was an example of, it was an enemy, but an enemy that was beaten, yeah? In the sense that when people get tired and say enough is enough, we want systems working, we want a fair shot at, these services like everybody else, and then those reforms take root, and systems begin to change. So it is not an impossible or an impossible enemy to beat. It is actually an enemy that can be beaten with good political goodwill, and all the environment that requires proper reforms to take root, and we are able to uproot it completely. Yeah.
Philip Kagushia, I'm looking at the meaning of cartel in the Oxford Dictionary, and it says a group of separate companies that agree to increase profits by fixing prices and not competing with each other. Again, I repeat, a group of separate companies that agree to increase profits by fixing prices and not competing with each other. And Philip said about business people who are using their networks, perhaps, and he also said it depends on in case you need a service, the informal way you're using to get that service quicker. But then again, question to you would come, then where and how, or at what point does ethics begin? Because I'm a business person. I mean, I'm here to make money.
Yeah, and that's a very good question, because enforcing ethics is almost like enforcing morality. It's very difficult. And, ethics is the code by which we have agreed we are going to live like this. We are not going to slap each other. We are not going to insult each other. We are not going to steal from each other. But living up to it is what is more difficult. And that is what we call integrity, the acting out of the ethical principles. Now, when I was looking at your tagline, cartels, whether they're, you call it an excuse, a scapegoat, or an impossible enemy. Unfortunately, Ibrahim, your tagline, it reeks of despair. It's almost as if we really cannot do anything about it. And I'm inclined to agree with Gishana here that it's not an impossible enemy. And that's why you have agencies like the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, because within our mandate, we are able to look into corruption and economic crime. And what we do is we investigate, we make recommendations, and the recommendations usually are two. For someone to be prosecuted, for the assets which have been lost to be recovered, or sometimes both. And we have numerous examples of such cases which have gone all the way to the courts and in different sectors. So for instance, some of the highest convictions and fines and recoveries from the agriculture sector, we had a famous NCPB case for maize, supply of maize worth 297 million. And there was a conviction. Unfortunately, one of the convicts is a member of the August House. It is unfortunate because those are the people we were depending on to lead us in reinforcing ethics. We had the NSSF case, your social security. Those ones were fined 9.6 billion. We had the youth enterprise. Again, there was a cartel there. They were fined, I think, 720 million. So these cases are many, and I agree with your definition of a cartel, because it's an association of usually manufacturers and suppliers, and the objective is to keep the prices high and to lock out competition. Why do they want to lock out competition? The primary motivation for corruption is to make money. The moment you allow competition, what you do is the citizens will get value for money. The reason this is so painful for the citizens of Kenya is that we are not getting value for money in most cases, whether for services or for goods. So EACC is doing its best. I've given you a few examples of some of the cases we've investigated, and there are many more which are ongoing as we speak.
You said that our tagline suggests despair, and I'll tell you why many Kenyans, not just us who made the tagline, would feel that perhaps there is no end in sight. Former President Uhuru Kenyatta, is on record saying the country loses about 2 billion shillings a day to corruption. He was the president then. I believe he was speaking from a point of information. I mean, he gets intelligence reports. But the report that you are getting from EACC about recovery of money for the past 1 year is about 28 billion shillings.
Yes.
2 billion lost per day, 28 billion shillings recovered in a year. Shouldn't Kenyans despair?
Not at all, because the fact that we're even discussing this 28 billion is progress. Remember, 10 years ago, you'd never have had this kind of conversation, okay? And also, the figure of 2 billion is an estimate. There is no empirical measure of corruption. You cannot measure corruption absolutely to the last decimal point. So sometimes it's an estimate. And remember, there are losses which occur through corruptions that you can't account for. So, for example, if you're losing time on a project that has stalled, we have this university in Kilifi. It has been going on, I think, for 11, 12 years. It's costing billions and billions of shillings. How do you quantify that loss? We know what the project costs, but how do you quantify the students who could have gone through that institution for the last 10 years? Again, it's very difficult. We have projects. We have an abattoir somewhere in Isiolo. It has never been used. We have a bridge which collapsed in Kajiado on the day it was commissioned. How do we account for that? So there's the cost of the project, but what about the loss to the people of Kenya? So that figure seems huge. Also, when EACC is recovering, remember EACC follows the rule of law, and I'm glad Mheshimiwa mentioned that in Kenya we respect the rule of law. We have to take evidence to court, and then we have to prove our case, and that is when we get the judgments. But more importantly, there are numerous cases where we actually recover through disruption. And what do I mean by disruption? Disruption is when we intervene before the money is actually lost.
Mm-hmm. Well, I come to you, Mheshimiwa Mutunga, Chair Agriculture. The latest, like we said earlier, was on the sugar cartel. But you come from a region that also grows several other crops that, if managed well, would see your people get rich. Talk about miraa, talk about coffee, tea, milk. All of these sectors are riddled with cartels, according to government officials. This I'm quoting the Deputy President. How bad is it?
I think the situation is quite dire, bearing in mind that, let me try a broader definition of cartel. First of all, the aim is to prevent competition. Make sure that nobody enters this market, we stay as a group or a few individuals. They also want to control market share among themselves, so that we do not have other people accessing the goods or services. They want to control the output to that extent, to the extent that they want to agree on the limits of the goods and services that are accessing the market. They also rig the bidding. When it comes to bidding, they also rig the bid. So they really contain the entire marketing of products. Some may even over-concentrate the chain. Some may even be involved in production all the way to the market. That is over-concentrating the chain, because investors should be focusing on a certain segment of the chain. Now, when it comes to crops like coffee, which we grow in Mount Kenya region, and which is right now under scrutiny because it's a crop that people have abandoned in a great way, and it's a crop that is really potential to grow this economy, to earn foreign exchange, employ our people, and basically support livelihoods. It has been infiltrated by cartels. And I'll give you a scenario of what we've discovered, because it's something that we've really looked into. We discovered that the farmer ends up to the factory when they deliver their coffee. Mm-hmm. The coffee is pulped, it's fermented and dried. So we have what is called parchment coffee. Parchment coffee is a coffee with a husk, which cannot be ground for, drinking. So that husk has to be removed. So somebody called a processor or a miller comes in to mill the coffee to get the green bean, which you now can trade across the world. So a cartel, let me say an individual, let's use my name. Mm-hmm. Somebody called John. A company called John offers to process that coffee for the farmers, for the factory, for an aggregate of factories. So we pay John to process the coffee and get the green bean. We grade that green, then they come back through another name, Kanywedia. The same company, same person, come as Kanywedia to offer to market this coffee for us. And we gladly allow this individual or company to do that. They charge us for marketing the coffee, for basically grading the coffee into the various categories and looking for market and discharging it, managing the auction and so on. Then on the other end, they come back as Mutunga to buy the coffee. So what are we saying? Same company is doing everything. And we allowed this as Kenyans. We are the ones who told them, okay. The problem we have in such a case is that a few companies sit and agree. We shall never buy this coffee because we are the buyers anyway. We are the processors anyway. We shall never buy it at higher than this price. Secondly, they sell this coffee to themselves and get the money. When they get this money, they put it in their own accounts for some time before they pay the farmer. Remember, the farmer is not paid that, it's not checked off. So they put it to earn interest. By the way, let me go back. They get money from our own banks. Your savings and my friends here, and they take that money, which they now use to buy the coffee. And once they buy the coffee, they get the proceeds and put it in their own account, fixed deposit account for some time. They earn the money and they end up lending the farmer, a loan. See, they control the inputs, they control everything. So
but
in
our
such
laws,
a situation, we'll come back to the laws. In such a situation, a few people, 3, 4, 5 companies can sit down and agree on sorting out Kenya. We know the market price is the value of Kenyan coffee out there.
True.
When Kenyan coffee leaves the boundaries of Kenya, it's never called Kenyan coffee. Kenyan coffee is specialty coffee. It's the best in the world. And it will not basically, it goes out there to supply, to improve the quality of the other coffee. It's a blender. It improves the quality, the smell, and the taste attributes of the coffee. Now, the problem is our laws allow this to happen because they play by the law. They are registered by the body discharged with that responsibility. They are regulated by the regulators of this. Everything is, Now, where the problem comes in is that most of this information is not disclosed. Even for us to get it, we can go out of our way. We have to go out of our way to try and even intercept some of the communications. And we realize that they are so deep-rooted, they manage what happens at the regulatory body level. They manage what happens at the farmers level. They actually elect the leaders of the coffee factories. They elect the people in the system to be aligned. The people in the other side, they are also, aligned. Everybody's aligned. And we keep managing. They live better lives than anybody in this country getting our coffee and selling. So that has discouraged coffee production in the country completely. We used to sell 120,000 metric tons of coffee outside this country. Right now, we are dealing between 36 to 40,000. If we reach 40,000, we are really lucky. That's how cartels can kill an industry. That's how we have been able to disengage our people from farming and, discharge those jobs and so many other things.
And you have said, Mheshimiwa, that our laws allow this to happen.
They do.
And this goes back to what I think either of the Philip said, that then we need to question who sponsors particular regulations when they are on the floor of the House. Philip, it was the both of you who agreed on it. Take case in point, the coffee issue. There are laws to it. There are laws protecting these individuals who are conducting this business. So, in essence, we have got no reason to complain. Even if you were to take them to court, you've got no legal background to it. Then how do we approach such situations?
We have a reason to complain because the effects of that cartel conduct are being felt by real people. Okay? That effect is real. It cannot be that we have a select few people who are making billions out of it, yet the people who are actually generating the production of the coffee or any other product for that matter are still languishing in poverty. And one of the most insidious effects of corruption is that it distorts the economy, it distorts the market, and it affects the poor and the marginalized disproportionately. So for instance, if you were struggling to get a passport yourself, can you imagine a person from Lokitang trying to get the same passport? they are more marginalized, which means they have to travel a bigger distance. They're going to struggle a lot more than you are. So this is the insidious effect of corruption. And I'm glad that Mheshimiwa is so candid about the role of cartels. And where EACC is concerned, for instance, something that had been mentioned is the bid rigging, because EACC comes into it and looks at the process. And if there's a stage in the process that was not followed, we are able to point out who did something, who failed to do something, and who holds the ultimate responsibility. Now, one curious phenomenon is the connection between now these cartels and the policymakers, which is what you were alluding to earlier. The cartels are so efficient that they can sponsor a policymaker or somebody who can go to the place where policies are made. I've just been recalling the conversation from the elections last year about how much it costs to get into office. And interestingly, they talk about to become a woman rep, you require about $280,000. To become an MP, you need $222,000. Apparently, the most, let me not say the cheapest, but the most affordable seat is MCA at $31,000. So take your case right now, Ibrahim. If you wanted to vie for MP for Njoro constituency, you would need $222,000. Now, I don't know if you have the money, and chances are, if
I have friends like you.
and I do not want to set the taxman on you unfairly, but for you to raise that 222,000, you might need to come to us. We're the ones who are the players in the industry, and we say we'll sponsor you, but you will control something like wheat in Njoro, or Njoro canning for fruits and vegetables. You understand what I mean? So it becomes a vicious cycle. So once you go there, you're in that public office, your allegiance is not to your people, your constituents. Your allegiance is to your sponsors, and it is a very tricky thing to do. It's a very difficult, you put yourself on the horns of a dilemma.
And Philip Gishana, doesn't then this make the fight against cartels even more difficult, even more vicious? Because if, according to the data that Kagusha is giving us, to get a political seat, you need such amounts of money. I'm wondering what you need for you to be a president. And that would mean that in one way or the other, someone would come in and support you. Another point of campaigning, you're in such dire need that you'd welcome everyone. So doesn't that then make it difficult when you assume office to actually set your foot on the ground and say, look, we are dealing with this once and for all?
It's quite a dilemma, but I must say the issue, and as highlighted by my colleague here, the cost of politics in this country is becoming unsustainable. And the way he has highlighted, that is the last election. By the time we get to the next election, the figures will have gone up. So this, if it continues like this, then we are likely to struggle. We need to get to a point where we say, we have had enough. And I think where we say that this corruption is not impossible to defeat is that at the point where we say enough is enough. And Mheshimiwa he highlighted and said that at the point the president was speaking, he could have been out of frustration and saying, these people are frustrating me in doing this. Putting in the right mechanism, supporting independent offices and commissions in this country, giving them the opportunity to work independently and supporting their work is one way of ensuring that we fight this. Encouraging the judiciary, I love the fact that the president himself opened the judiciary fund. That means he has trust in that office and he wants to see that arm of government delivering. So with that kind of trust, we expect that institution to deliver, because all these institutions yearly have their own scorecard. They do their own scorecard and say, we were given this money by the taxpayer. Vis-a-vis, this is our mandate. This is what we delivered. Like Kagusha said here, that in the institution, every year, annually, they have to look what they have done the whole year, vis-a-vis what are their mandates, vis-a-vis the budgets that they were given. So then they have to show what the money they receive from the taxpayers vis-a-vis what they delivered. On the policy and legal reforms, Parliament needs also to step up. If I can say on the policy reforms, we have made quite a number of progress ever since I think the promulgation of the Constitution. We have right now the Access to Information Act, a very powerful act that I could write to the, the committee of Mheshimiwa where he sits and ask him, Mheshimiwa, could you give us the details of this report, how you arrived at this report? And is obliged by law to do that, to give me that report. Then if I find it at fault, I can be able to highlight it. 2016, the same year, I think 2016 was a magical year. We had again the Bribery Act. We adopted it. That ensures that even bribery in the private sector should not be happening. We have made progress. If you look at the beneficial ownership, like now, how do we know that Kagusha is the one trading as John and also trading as Mary in another setting and whatever? We have put in the structures. We have now a register that is at the business registration services. We have a register that if the EACC wants to know how Kagusha, for example, is trading, they can go there and ask for that information. They would know that in this company he trades as this, in this company he trades as this. That way, we bring transparency into the system, ensuring that we know who are these key players, running this circle or the cartel circle, as we have said, as Mheshimiwa has highlighted, that you would find them here. When you go in another, they are like a chameleon. They change face and they look somebody else, but there's one and the same. So we have put in these laws, and we expect that these laws eventually will take root. It hasn't been an easy journey. You can imagine since 2016, we got the beneficial ownership register last year. I think last year. So some of these things, I accept they take quite some time to actualize and see. But the benefits are there, and that's why it's not something we should stop. What worries me, and for example, like in this 13th Parliament, what worries me is the assault on the Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Act. The items, I think there was one to ensure that the procurement officers are not held liable, for the offenses that are committed in the procurement chain. That would be really unfortunate. Why would I would let the whole system run amok because I know nothing can be done to me. But if I know that I can be held accountable, then it begs that I have to do my due diligence, follow the law, and ensure everything follows through. So we have to guard. We are a country that is struggling with the corruption yoke. We have to guard against the policy and legal reforms that have been made over the years, and ensure we continue the incremental way. Ensure if this punishment is not harsh enough, let us make it harsher, because fighting corruption has become a matter of life and death for this country. When a child misses education, you essentially tell that person to go and become a thug outside there. And what are we saying about thugs? They be shot or end up, in the jails and all that. So it is a matter of really life and death. Somebody misses medicine somewhere because I have embezzled money that was supposed to deliver that medicine. People die.
Philip, allow me to cut you short, because I feel there's something you're mentioning that still intertwines with what all the three of you are saying. That yes, we need to have harsher punishments, harsher policies. But the question is, then who will legislate on this? Because again, according to Philip, it is the very people who we call cartels here, who sponsor, allow me to use your example, Mheshimiwa Mutunga to Parliament, for instance. That would then mean a fight like the one that the President is speaking about right now, about sugar, a fight like the one being pushed by the Deputy President on coffee, tea and milk, a fight that is being pushed, say, by the Interior CS on Nyayo House, or by Moses Kuria on edible oil, is also a fight in vain, because by the end of the day, they'll be coming to Parliament to depend on you to give them legislations, but you are all, or most of you, are sponsored out of the 290 elected members of Parliament. So, are these fights in vain? Is there hope?
Allow me to intervene. There is hope, because we can rely on the few men and women of good conscience. Because
Parliament is about numbers.
Yes. But even the longest journey starts with a single step. They talk about the seed becoming a mustard seed becoming a huge tree. It starts like that, and on occasion you don't succeed at the very first instance. That is why when Gishana is talking, he's taking you back historically, because we didn't have a Bribery Act in 2016, yet now we have a Bribery Act. We now have that BRS register, things we were not discussing before. So there'll be many bumps on the road, and anybody who's in this industry of anti-corruption If you're in anti-corruption and everyone is your friend, you're not working. That is the truth.
Mheshimiwa, how infiltrated is Parliament by cartels that you know?
The Parliament works through committees. And when committees are being put together, nobody knows which committee they will go to. You normally write your professional background, and I mean, you indicate your professional background at the point of admission.
Wait a minute. I want to disagree with you on that, because I covered when members were being placed in committees, especially for this 13th Parliament, and there were interests in specific committees. Specifics. So it would mean
at the end
that
of
also
the day,
members were looking for something to...
I wanted to come there. I'm saying that at inception, when you are filling in the form for admission into the National Assembly or Senate, you normally, there's a form you fill where you indicate your strength, your experience, your educational background, and so on. And through that, the committee on selection, the committee on that puts together the other committees, basically looks at that. And especially if they're giving you a responsibility, they also check whether you have the capacity to lead that particular sector. So, really, on very rare cases, will you find synchrony between the promises made during the election and also being located in the right committee for you to be able to respond to those issues. Let me say this. Parliament is not overly influenced. There could be efforts at the point of legislation, at the point of creating a law. There could be efforts, but you meet all stakeholders. And if at that point in time there is influence, even a committee can be dismantled. The standing orders are very clear. If anything, if there is a hint that something is happening that's not quite correct, and it has happened, it happened in the 11th Parliament, even 12th Parliament, we had some reshuffles and so on. Now, so there is no direct link between the election and the process before being elected into Parliament and what happens in Parliament. The other issue is that all is not lost. We have quite a number of laws, and laws come in to cure mischief. Right now, we are doing the bill on the sugar industry. The sugar bill is coming in to cure most of those mischief that are in the sugar industry. And we are looking at even how can we make sure that there is proper price. For instance, sugar is very well managed in terms of pricing, because there's a pricing committee at the Agriculture and Food Authority, which is the regulator. And this pricing committee is made up of representatives from the entire chain actors. Now, in some other cases where we do not have such a committee, then when you are doing the law, you must make sure that you safeguard those who are vulnerable, especially the farmers are mainly vulnerable. Now, when it comes to Kenya as a country and the laws that we have, I think there's a gap somewhere. There's a law we are missing, which is called an antitrust law. We do not have a law that cures conspiracy. We do not have that law. And we need to bring such a legislation, something that we need to look into. Make sure that anybody who engages in circumstances, in discussions, in plans that aim at stealing from the people, commits a crime. And that is what we do not have. America has such a law, and we borrowed a lot from the American Constitution. I think we missed that particular. I don't know whether it was deliberate or by mistake. Now, when it comes to legal, regulatory, and policy reforms, the goodwill is 100% there. Debates at in the House normally hinge on where is it coming from. Is it an individual member, sponsored bill, or is it government bill, or is it a bill by the opposition? When it is a party bill, we treat it as such. When it is a government bill, maybe through the committee or through the leader majority, and then the individuals also bring their bills. And in most cases, the debate is, in all cases, let me say, is very clean. There is nobody who could stand there and try to protect, because people will notice, and they will fire him on the floor. And there are records. The law is made based on what is recorded, what is already, in the Hansard. They listen to the Hansard very carefully. They draft the legislation and then give it back to the committee to scrutinize letter by letter. So, and then it is taken back to the public participation for public participation again. So at the end of the day, we have good laws. What happens is that cartels, as defined, go back to that good law to find space in it.
Find loopholes.
How can we survive under the circumstances? If they are able to control, for instance, at the point of regulation,
Very
they
briefly,
come in
because we have
very
to take a
strongly.
break.
At the point of regulation, they could come in strongly. If you look at what happened in March this year, we formed a caucus when we came in as the 13th Parliament, a coffee caucus. And one of the things we were against was a regulation that was signed by the former CS Munya, CS Agriculture, on, I think it was on 22nd of July last year.
True.
Just a few days before the election. And this particular regulation was basically entrenching those cartels now to do their work better. And we noticed that and reversed it, and it was withdrawn from there.
And that is a story that NTV gave extensive investigations on. I remember that story, Black Gold Heist, by NTV. But we shall be discussing about how to seal these loopholes. Look at these opportunities that, or advantages that government officials appear to be taking, sort of entrenching a law when Parliament is heading to sine die, recess, and how to treat this. But you are watching AM Live. Time to take another break. The conversation is about a country of cartels. We are asking again, is it a scapegoat? Is it an excuse, a convenient excuse, or the impossible to beat enemy? My guests will be here on the other end of the break to give you context to what we are discussing. Don't go too far.
Acne's Creamy Wash is a foamy and gentle cleanser that removes sebum and dirt in the pores. Step 2. Acne Soothing Toner maintains skin pH. Step 3. Acne Sealing Gel quickly clears pimple-causing bacteria. The latent acne clears, tears, and helps prevent pimple.
When you're finally released from pain, that moment when you start to get back to ordinary, and ordinary feels amazing. Whatever pain you're going through, release starts here.
With Glovo unaweza order chochote na ukipata una celebrate na body yako yote. Because your tasty grilled chicken ikifika, weekend inaanza. Ingredients are your favorite recipe just in time. Na wakati keki inafika ndio sherehe inaanza. Because to get anything on Glovo deserves a dance. Download the app, order anything unataka na we track minute by minute mpaka ikufikie. Glovo, order anything, we deliver in minutes.
You can balance kile unapanda utavuna wewe. Welcome to the home of the latest gospel hits.
Tavuna wewe. Amazing Bible teachings.
Great conversations.
In studio and live on location shows.
As are we crossing over? Jesus taking over. All this under one show. And that is let me tell you real things. Say
that airs this and every Sunday from 11:30 to 1 p.m. only on NTV.
What a Sunday, not to sit okay. From Sunday to Sunday.
Or you've shot someone and brought him here for me to operate on.
No, it's so much worse. I'm here to take you to the opening of the new rehabilitation center.
Great, just what I need. I'll be needing rehabilitation.
It's just for drug addicts. You sure? Are you sure about what you're telling me right now?
Wait a little. There must be a way out. Maybe it's a good idea to escape, but not now and not like this. You must calculate everything.
New your dream home for as low as 1.98 million Kenya shillings in Vipingo Kilifi. SMS Vipingo to 22365 or call us today on 0740 400 215. Terms and conditions apply.
All right, welcome back. You are watching AM Live on NTV. Remember, you can join the conversation on Twitter by tweeting us at AM Live NTV or at NTV Kenya and tell us your thoughts about our topic. You can as well tweet me directly at Karanja_Ibra. My guests are still here, the two Philips and one John. The other John definitely has failed to turn up. But the conversation continues nonetheless. And I'll come to you, Philip Kagushia. And there's that question I asked you while we were on a break, that we could find that indeed regulations and policies that are being pushed in Parliament have got an ulterior motive. But this policy with an ulterior motive is very constitutional in that you cannot go to court to challenge it. Then does EACC have a way of coming back to, see the members of Parliament involved in pushing this? Because you look at the greater picture, it's going to be negative to the society.
Well, if you go to the Constitution Article 80, Parliament was obligated to enact legislation for the effective administration of Chapter 6 of the Constitution. And Chapter 6 of the Constitution, as you are aware, deals with leadership and integrity. Unfortunately, what we got, which is the Leadership and Integrity Act of 2012, is a very, very diluted piece of legislation. And we actually went to court in 2012. And our argument was that the Leadership and Integrity Act was unconstitutional. Unfortunately, which is what you're saying, the court says it may not meet the expectations of Kenyans, but that does not necessarily make it unconstitutional. So what are our solutions? What are our options? One of the things that happens is we have what we call public interest litigation. These are cases which are filed by institutions, they are filed by individuals, they are filed by members from private sector, civil society organizations, and they critique either a substantive legislation or regulations or guidelines, and they say, if you implement this, it is going to have these adverse effects. And in some cases, the EACC has actually applied to join those proceedings as an interested party, especially where it falls on the mandate. The other thing that I think is a more long-term solution is a message to Kenyans generally, and that is electing leaders of integrity. Because if you have people of integrity in positions where they are making decisions, they are more likely than not going to make the right decision. But as long as you have people who are unethical in those positions, the result is obvious. They are less likely to make decisions that are in the interest of the people of Kenya. So in that sense, we have a little bit of leeway in challenging these things, but we cannot necessarily call them illegal.
Philip Gishana, you come from the background of the civil societies or organizations. In dealing with cartels, in dealing with corruption, you individually have looked at this at length or in great depth. Where is the loophole? Is the loophole in the policy makers? Is the loophole in the enforcers? And how then do we cure it?
For me, I see, and I wouldn't want to put maybe one arm of government on the spot, that is where the loophole is, because the fight against corruption is a fight for everyone. Once citizens, give their powers to the members of parliament, they should ask, what are you using? What are you using the powers that we gave you to do? Are you advancing the interest of Mwananchi, or are you subverting the interest of Mwananchi? So that's another level. If it is the executive, those powers again given by the executive, how are you using those powers? That's why we can say the president here is wrong, the ministers here are wrong when they display certain conduct we don't expect them. We call them out. If it is the judiciary, again, we say that the judiciary, here there are decisions you've given us that we are not very comfortable. And Kagusha here will tell you that some of the decisions that he mentions, we have been in court together on a number of public interest litigation issues around the Chapter 6. We have gotten very progressive judgments, that entrench Chapter 6. The Waititu case is an example. The Sonko case was an example. The Lon Kulal, case where a governor is told to step aside. A very positive, cases that advance integrity in the public sector. We expect to see the other courts also upholding that. So there is a role where every institution has to play. But I wish to come back to Parliament and say that there is an expectation from the public, especially to Parliament, because of the powers the people donate to Parliament directly. The issue of, the conduct of members of Parliament has been a question. And people are asking, when a member of Parliament behaves like this, what picture is he sending? It's the office he represents. He sits there not in his capacity as an individual. He sits there as a member of Parliament here and there. So the privileges that accrue, for example, for a member of Parliament, I know by virtue of his profession, is to that office. So I want to say this. We've struggled with the ethics of when it comes maybe to the conduct of members of Parliament sometimes. And I remember in the other house, the 12th house, the speaker then actually had to issue guidelines when Parliament is conducting probes. And I think it was a sugar-related issue. It was the mercury-laden sugar issue. And the speaker was not very happy with seeing the members of Parliament hugging the people who are being probed and, chatting cozily in that kind of a scenario. It would be, we expect you to be there, all eyes out, guns blazing, seeking the right answers for the Kenyan public. So when I look at also something that we could borrow is having something like an ombudsman in the house, within the various houses. I acknowledge the powers and privileges committees in the various houses, the powers that they do have to regulate the conduct, but that conduct is regulated just within the precincts of the house. But we need the conduct to be regulated even outside. If a Mheshimiwa is in a club and brandishing his gun, we need him held accountable, even if it is, he can be charged, but also lose a few privileges because he holds those privileges by virtue of being a member of Parliament. On the issue of the legislations that we've had, I acknowledge that some have been done very well and some might not have been done very well. But Mheshimiwa here will tell you that the committee, under his committee, will be handling a number of legislations. Some that were done before his tenure and some that are still in his tenure. So maybe there is a culture that we should also adopt, that we should, the way we look at the regulatory impact statements for regulations that are developed to implement legislations, we should also do the same exercise to legislations. Mheshimiwa right now could be, looking at how many legislations we have adopted as the Agriculture Committee, even before my tenure. How they govern this. Like now I was talking about the sugar. There could be many others. The agriculture industry is one industry that has quite a number of legislations. And it's no offense that you could find a post-colonial legislation up to date. I won't be shocked. So there is need to also do that internal reflections per committee to look at where we have come from. Are these laws, for example, serving the interest of the people? What reforms do we bring out so that we don't wait for just a member of Parliament to come up with one piece of a legislation? If it is good, then you proceed. But just having an wholesome view of the legislations that govern in a certain sector. I think that will be able to guide where we are going. And even in the anti-corruption sector, I would expect the Justice and Legal Affairs, for example, that has mandate to look at the anti-corruption issues. I would expect them to be guided by that kind of backward reflection. You look backwards and see if this law we adopted at this time, is it living to the standards of where we are today? Then put it to the standards that of the Constitution and the current economic times.
Mheshimiwa, this is not the first time we are hearing concerns, not only in the agricultural sector, like I said in the introduction, but in various other sectors, from as long as my memory serves me, each subsequent administration has been speaking about cartels, has been speaking, especially in the agricultural sector, but again, like I said, everywhere else. How do we then hope, because one, you are in Kenya Kwanza, how do you guys ensure that this is the last time that we will have this being spoken about again, that we will not see the 6th president again come with such promises and threats that I'll deal with this, but we still have the same problem?
To deal out cartels completely, the government has to be deliberate. The government has to go out to solve the problem. We all understand what problem there is, and we know which areas needs to be tackled. I would like to say that in agriculture, in almost every subsector, you might have pockets of cartels. At the beginning, in his opening statement, the gentleman from EACC talked about the oilseed industry in Kenya. And Kenya imports oil, edible oil, worth more than 120 billion every year. Kenya can produce this oil. Kenyans can produce this oil. When you decide to take a decision, policy decision to import, you do several things at once. You deny Kenyans, 2 million Kenyans, that opportunity to earn a living. You also commit the livestock industry, the entire feed industry, to importation of the raw materials. It's a choice. So, a government has to be deliberate. All these things are known, they are understood. And the effort has been there to try and even highlight them to the leadership. I came from the civil society personally before I became a politician, within the agricultural sector, and there were so many things that we were highlighting. But you see, when you highlight something to the government doesn't take it up, then you cannot go very far. But when government is deliberate, and I believe the Kenya Kwanza government will be deliberate. So far, there are signs, it has shown signs, and that is why you see the president even making such task statements. Because we would like to clean the sector. Agriculture is the, they talk about backbone of the economy, but I'll tell you, agriculture is the one that holds this country together. The greater majority of Kenyans are anchored there. They are busy producing their own food to eat. From that process, they also get a livelihood. So if we protect this sector, and this sector becomes remunerative to the stakeholders, then we are sure of growing an economy, because the greater majority of Kenyans will be benefiting. But a few individuals have infiltrated almost every value chain. What can a government do? Very simple. Structure out the chains. Invest where the government should solve the problems. Look at, for instance, the grain industry. Why is the grain industry a motivator to the farmers? In some areas, and in some areas it's really dissuasive. You know, when you produce your maize, you take it to the National Cereals and Produce Board. There will be a negotiation on the price, and for sure you will get your cut. If you are producing maize and you have no storage facility, first of all, if you harvest during the cold season, you have a problem of aflatoxin, so you might lose the entire harvest. If a government puts together, and this government has actually done it as at last week, the president ordered for procurement of, I don't know how many, more than 120 or so, dryers. Now, if you have a dryer, you are sure this maize will be dried. Therefore, you will not lose the entire product. The next thing we need to do is ask ourselves, do we have enough warehousing for this product? Then, growing even maize can be a business. But it fails to be a business when you produce, all of us produce maize in our locality and go to the market at the same time. We depress the prices ourselves. Somebody comes in here, a buyer who has a storage facility, and it benefits from the entire 6 months of sweating from the farmers. So you look at farmers as if they are not okay in their head, because they will sell at 15 shillings a kilo, and within 2 months, you will sell at 45 shillings a kilo. So you will get 30 shillings per kilo from the produce that somebody has spent six months producing. So there is need for a government to structure out the entire investment. And Kenya Kwanza government has come up with the industrial parks. The industrial parks idea is extremely good, because we have, first of all, the cold storage chain, and then the dry storage chain, where we will have even the dryers pre-drying before you store. In that case, they has also come up with, we did that law in the last government, in the last parliament. We did the warehouse receipting system. Warehouse receipting is basically where you check in your produce and then you go with a receipt. Ideally, because farmers have suffered over 6 months, we should be able to pay them the value of their produce at the point of disengagement. In that case, they will be able to sort out their produce as they wait, then they will have a bonus. That's how tea is sold. That's how other crops we have been able to promote. But if we make a decision to import, we have a problem. I want to tell you a story. I followed this issue of well seed. Discussed with stakeholders in the sector, even on procurement. Somebody offers 23 shillings a kilo, and then at the point of harvest, he offers 17. And he's a main buyer. So what do? Farmers lose the difference. And the cost of production is around 20. So they pay him or her 3 shillings per kilo they sell to him. You see what I mean? We sack them. So they cannot continue doing that.
All right, Mheshimiwa, you've said that there is need to structure out the entire investment. I believe structure out the entire value chain. But even as we structure out the entire value chain, Kagushia, we also need to have hope that bad elements are being, removed.
Yes.
Parliament may have done its part to some extent. Other investigative agencies may have done their part as well, or media, or civil societies. Does EACC have something that would say, especially on cartels, that look, we took this, it was thrown to us by Parliament, we took it up, we followed it up to successful prosecution, and this is what we recovered? Do you have such cases?
Actually, there are quite a number. The only thing I might not be able to do is talk about matters which are under active investigation. But by way of example, and this is something that Mheshimiwa has mentioned, it was actually, I was actually quite passionate about. In 2018, we investigated NCPB maize scandal in North Rift. Well, I was based in the North Rift. And you'll be shocked at the cartelism that is there. The farmers would have to deliver the maize to brokers, yet there is a government policy for subsidizing the cost of maize to benefit farmers, not brokers. But because of the conditions, that is why I agree with Mheshimiwa when he says you need to structure systems in such a way that the farmer is not disadvantaged. So for instance, that example he gave about whether the maize has moisture content, that would be a challenge. You would find queues of trucks outside NCPB in Eldoret, and they have been there for a month. And every time they would check the maize, they would say it still has too much moisture. But if you say the maize belongs to Gishana, the truck
is quickly taken.
Quickly taken. And we actually have a case. I think a former PS was charged. The matter is in court. One family from North Rift supplied maize worth 750 million. One family. Yet they only owned 40 acres. So you see, these are some of the things that happen, and we encounter them. And the truth is, the people who suffer the most, again, remember what I said, corruption affects the marginalized more disproportionately than the rest of us. So that is what the farmer is on who is being oppressed by this scheme. Now, about hope or despair and so on and so forth, I would like to say this. When you look at the progress that the war against corruption, what the war against corruption has achieved, you may not be seeing it because it is happening in real time. It is almost like going to the gym today for the first time and thinking you're going to get muscles. It takes years. Now, what has happened to EACC, and I'm sure Gishana knows about this because of his background, the measure of Kenya's performance in the war against corruption is the TI Corruption Perception Index. And if you go back the last 5 years, again, a very good metric, we started in 2018 at position 144. In 2019, position 137. In 2020, position 122. In 2021, we went back a little bit to position 130. But this year we are position 120 out of 180 countries. So even if you were to plot the graph, generally the trend is upwards. So I think there's a lot of hope. And
so we are heading back during an election year?
We may have slipped back a little bit. I don't know if, as a researcher, as a scholar of corruption, what you say, correlation is not causation. So we may be correlated, but there may be no causation. And my feeling is this, it takes years. As I mentioned, we got an Anti-Corruption Act in 2003. We got a Public Officer Ethics Act in 2003. We didn't get Procurement and Disposal Act 2015, the reviewed one, and a Bribery Act in 2016. We are still pushing Bunge to give us even better laws. And that is why when Gishana talks about people undermining the war against corruption, is when we have members of parliament saying, scrap this section of the law because, for instance, the one about procurement, we know who the sponsors of that motion are. It's people who are affected by that case. Most recently, we have another proposal to scrap the section that bars people who have been found
impeached,
yes, or guilty of corruption.
Guilty, yeah.
Now, remember, this debarment is an effective tool because even for cartels, if you have that John company, which is bid rigging together with Mutunga company and the Kanyuvia company, yet it's the same person. If you debar that company, you debar not only the company, but also the directors. So I thank you for the opportunity of coming here, because every time I appear in the media, I feel like I'm recruiting disciples. I have a feeling that Honorable Mutunga here is already a convert, and when he goes back to Bunge, we will be reaching out to him to continue supporting the EACC and other law enforcement agencies and other players in the criminal justice chain.
Mm-hmm. From the civil society, what challenge would you tell those who are in those positions of making decisions, the decision-making organs, Parliament, the executive, and as well as the enforcers, if we are indeed to be successful in the fight against corruption, and particularly against cartels who have infiltrated very many sectors?
What I would love to tell them is that the citizen is always right. When the citizen complains and says, you know, these things are not working, better listen to them. And sometimes this kind of issues, you see now we're having the coffee reforms, they come from mwananchi somewhere. When people are complaining about the passport issue, you know, you listen to them, dissect the problem, and give them the result that they want. There is a very high expectation, especially for Kenya Kwanza. I've read the manifesto through and through. It was unfortunate that it didn't have the word corruption many times. It is just mentioned about 4 times in that manifesto. But it is replete with, you know, issues to do with transparency and accountability, value for money. This is what the citizens want. If they are paying taxes, let them see the value for their taxes. All these cartels that we're talking about ensure that they suffer the harshest penalties. You know, we normally say that if corruption is beneficial, then it becomes attractive to everybody. But if corruption is completely a loss, it's a business venture that even me, I wouldn't want to join. So, Philip Kagushia, they should be making it very hard. If I steal from an institution, they ensure that they recover 4 times, even the interest that I could have derived from what I've stolen. Then I won't see any benefit in participating in corrupt issues. I'd rather look for my money in a genuine way. So there is that need to have a concerted fight to ensure that the people, the marginalized, the poor, who suffer the biggest brunt of these corruption practices, are protected and insulated. If you look at the issues to do with healthcare, the rich can afford private healthcare. If it is education, the rich again can afford private education. I mean, even transport, public transport is the same. So let us ensure that we protect the people who are marginalized and give them the services that they deserve by virtue of them paying taxes. Mm-hmm. That's what I would say.
It is interesting how time flies, because I'm just about to ask that you do a round of closing comments. And I'll start with you, Mheshimiwa, being chair of agriculture in the National Assembly. Now let's narrow down to agriculture. The very many fronts that the government has taken. It is now about, I think, 1 year since the declaration that coffee, tea will be sorted out, the cartels will be kicked out. How far are we? Because much as it is being said by the executive, you are the guys who are mandated to make it happen. How far are we in making sure that we have cleaned the sector, even as you give us your closing comments?
First of all, thank you very much for this show. And I think this is the direction Kenya should go, media especially. If we want to remain relevant, to tackle the issues. Stop tackling politics every day, morning, evening, just politics. Let's deal with these issues, because we need to also get ideas on how to tackle them as it were. When it comes to the agricultural sector and the issues within the agricultural sector, we're actually reviewing almost every subsector in agriculture. to identify where are the bottlenecks, where do we have huge losses, why is the chain choked, and relieving that particular area so that we can be able to get the people enjoy agriculture as a business. Because it's one thing talking about agriculture as a business or farming as a business, and it's the other issue to see whether it's a business or it's a livelihood or it's an enslaving, process. Now, for coffee, we are at the point where a bill is already done at Senate, and I think is transiting to National Assembly. The sugar, we have done the bill, it is almost transiting to Senate. What we have agreed as Senate and the National Assembly for purposes of concurrence and fast tracking these bills, we will have a joint meeting where we shall brief the Senate committee on the extent to which we have gone with the sugar bill, and they will brief us on the extent to which they have gone with the coffee bill, and we shall be able to build concurrence so that when it comes to the National Assembly, it's fast tracked, and then we can be able to get the two bills out. There was a tea bill we did last Parliament. We will need to look at a few issues because we also identified later on even the regulatory instruments that were brought in to implement that particular legislation had some faults, and we entrenched a few issues which did not need to be there. The other sectors, we are looking at them. We're having a bill on livestock which is covering the entire sector, and within the crop subsector we have several. I saw the cotton and the oilseeds, the coconut and the cashew bill, which basically will focus on a little bit on oilseed. We will expand it to cover the entire oilseed, and so on and so on. So they are there, they are coming up, and we are trying to look at what remains within the Agriculture and Food Authority and what can get out of Agriculture and Food Authority, in as far as they are able to take care of themselves, because money bills are expensive.
What does EACC then commit to in light of this new energized war? Because looking at the environment today, you'd say there's an energized war against cartels, and institutions like the EACC are expected to take advantage of this particular environment. What would you commit to?
Absolutely. The problem is that if we insist that the only face of EACC that Kenyans see is the enforcement one, this is where somebody is arrested, somebody is interviewed, they are in before court. You need to have a carrot and stick approach, and that is where the mandate of EACC is actually quite broad, because it deals with both combating corruption, which is the enforcement, but also the prevention. And in terms of the prevention side, we have engaged with so many government agencies, ministries, departments, state agencies, to conduct what we call corruption risk assessments and systems reviews. And we've done that for so many agencies, because what we do is we go in and we identify the corruption hotspots. And for example, one of the biggest hotspots is procurement, and you tell them your supply chain has an issue, fix it. If it is human resources because the boss is recruiting only his village mates or his relatives, again we point that out. If it is public finance management, you go to accounts and you tell them you need to be careful about this, because the next time I will come as an enforcer. So those are some of the things they do. And finally, we are promoting ethics. And that is why you saw EACC intervening when we had the Kitui East Member of Parliament assaulting a Kenya Power employee. So we have a very broad mandate. That's what we are committing to do. We are committing to step up the efforts in the combating, which is the enforcement, and also the prevention and promoting ethical standards in this country.
Finally, Philip Gishana, partnerships, and make this 1 minute as your closing comment. Partnerships between civil societies and the policy making organs, as well as agencies such as the EACC, because most of the times it has been sort of critiquing. Civil societies come out to critique, but then would expect to see partnerships so that there is a joint focus in curbing this war. Yeah. Is it something that is on the table for civil societies?
It has always been on the table as civil society, and when I speak, for example, to Kagusha here, he will tell you that we were sitting together in a table working on the bribery guidelines and regulations. So there's a point where you have to sit in a boardroom and come up with so many things. These things people might not see out here, but they are happening. Same with Parliament. We sit with various directorates of Parliament. We submit our researchers on a number of legislations that they are coming out with. Those are things you won't see in Parliament, but you won't see in the public. But we always also are very keen to also highlight, because we believe we speak also for the citizens, that if something wrong is happening, we will spotlight it. if the House is slow to respond on a certain issue, if it is a bit, we find it is findings not resonating with the people, we will tell them, yeah? And I believe that is constructive. It does not need for us to throw stones. We will put the facts and even offer solutions if we're invited to the table.
Thank you very much, Philip Gishana, the Head of Policy and Partnerships at Mzalendo Trust, who joined us for this conversation. We also have Philip Kagushia. Like I said, we had two Philips. Philip Kagushia is a Deputy Director, Legal Services, Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. We also had the Honorable John Kanyuithia Mutunga, Member of Parliament, Tigania West, as well as the Chairperson, Agriculture Committee in the National Assembly. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us this morning. And that is where we bring AM Live, or this particular conversation, to a close. My name is Ibrahim Karanja. Be sure to join us tomorrow morning for yet another exciting conversation on what is happening in the country. On behalf of the entire team behind the scenes, been led by Blackjack, the Super Director, we tell you, do enjoy the rest of your viewing.